The winter wind cut across the Montana plains like a knife through butter, carrying with it the promise of another brutal snowstorm. James Thornton sat tall in his saddle, his expensive Stetson shielding his weathered face from the biting cold. At 42, James had everything a man could want. A sprawling ranch that stretched as far as the eye could see, cattle numbered in the thousands, and enough money in the bank to last 3 lifetimes. His custom-made boots alone cost more than most families earned in a month. And his watch, a vintage Rolex his father had given him, could have fed a small town for a year. Yet despite all his wealth, there was an emptiness inside him that no amount of money could fill. His wife had passed away 5 years ago from cancer, leaving him alone in his mansion with nothing but memories and regrets. He'd thrown himself into his business, expanding his empire, but success felt hollow when there was no one to share it with. Today he was riding the far edges of his property, checking fence lines before the storm hit, when he noticed something unusual in the distance. Through the swirling snow, he spotted a dilapidated cabin that he'd never paid much attention to before. Smoke rose weakly from its crooked chimney, and the roof looked like it might collapse at any moment. The windows were patched with cloth and cardboard, and the wooden walls were so weathered they'd turned almost black with age. James frowned, realizing with a pang of guilt that someone was actually living in that death trap, and it was technically on the border of his land. As he urged his horse closer, he saw a figure emerge from the cabin. A woman, probably in her mid-30s, wearing a threadbare coat that was several sizes too large. She was carrying a bucket, heading toward a half-frozen stream about 50 yards away. Her boots were wrapped with rope to keep them together, and she moved with the careful, measured steps of someone conserving every ounce of energy. James watched, transfixed, as she knelt by the stream, broke through a layer of ice with a rock, and filled her bucket with water. The simple act, something he took entirely for granted every day, struck him with the force of a physical blow. When the woman turned to head back to the cabin, she finally noticed James sitting on his horse watching her. She froze, and even from a distance he could see the fear flash across her face. People living in such desperate circumstances often had reasons to be wary of strangers, especially wealthy landowners who might chase them off. James raised his hand in what he hoped was a friendly gesture and slowly rode closer. As he approached, he could see her more clearly. High cheekbones, dark eyes that held both intelligence and sadness, and long brown hair pulled back in a simple braid. Despite her circumstances, there was a dignity about her, a quiet strength that commanded respect. "Ma'am," James said, tipping his hat. "I'm James Thornton. I own the ranch that borders this area. I didn't realize anyone was living here." The woman set down her bucket, her expression guarded. "I'm Sarah Mitchell," she said, her voice hoarse from the cold. "I'm sorry if I'm trespassing. I can leave if—" No, James interrupted quickly. "That's not why I'm here. I just—" "How long have you been living in this cabin?" Sarah's shoulders relaxed slightly, though suspicion still lingered in her eyes. "About 8 months now. Since last spring." James looked at the cabin again, noting the gaps in the walls where wind whistled through, the door that hung crooked on its hinges, the roof that sagged dangerously in the middle. "Ma'am, I don't mean to pry, but that cabin doesn't look safe, especially with this storm coming. Don't you have anywhere else to go?" Sarah's jaw tightened, and for a moment, James thought she might tell him to mind his own business. Instead, she let out a long breath, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of 1,000 disappointments. "This is what I have. Mr. Thornton, my husband died 2 years ago in a construction accident. The company he worked for claimed he wasn't following safety protocols, so there was no compensation. We lost our home, our savings, everything. I've been moving from place to place, taking whatever work I can find, but it's hard. People don't trust a woman alone, and they certainly don't want to hire one. I found this cabin abandoned and figured it was better than sleeping in my truck. At least it has walls and a roof. Sort of." She lifted her chin defiantly, as if daring him to judge her. James felt something crack open inside his chest. Here was a woman who had lost everything, who was barely surviving in conditions that would break most people, and yet she stood before him with her head held high, asking for nothing. In that moment, James Thornton made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He dismounted from his horse and looked Sarah Mitchell directly in the eyes. "Ma'am, I can't in good conscience ride away and leave you here. That storm is going to be a bad one, and this cabin won't survive it. I have a proposition for you, and I want you to hear me out before you say no." Sarah's eyes narrowed with suspicion, and James could practically see her walls going up. He'd expected that reaction. "I'm not that kind of woman, Mr. Thornton," she said coldly. "I may be poor, but I have my dignity." James actually laughed, surprising them both. "Lord, no, that's not what I meant at all. I apologize. I should have been clearer." He took off his hat and ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair, suddenly feeling nervous in a way he hadn't experienced in years. "I have a ranch house, a big one, far too big for just me. It has a housekeeper's cottage out back that's been sitting empty for 2 years since my last housekeeper retired and moved to Florida. It's winterized, has heat, running water, a full kitchen, and a bedroom. It's yours if you want it." Sarah stared at him as if he'd grown a second head. "Just like that? You don't even know me. Why would you do this?" James thought about how to explain it, how to put into words the sudden clarity he'd felt watching her break. "Nice to get water. My wife, Margaret, she used to volunteer at shelters and food banks. She was always bringing people home, helping folks get back on their feet. After she died, I shut down. I focused on making money, expanding the business, but I forgot what she always tried to teach me, that wealth means nothing if you don't use it to help others. You remind me of her, actually. That same fire, that refusal to give up no matter how hard life gets." Sarah's expression softened slightly, but doubt still lingered. "And what would you expect in return?" James shrugged. "Honestly, I could use someone to help around the ranch house. My current housekeeper comes 3 times a week, but the place is big, and there's always work to be done. If you wanted to earn your keep, you could help with cooking, cleaning, that sort of thing, but that's entirely up to you. The cottage is yours regardless for as long as you need it. No strings attached." For a long moment, Sarah didn't speak. James could see her mind working, weighing her options, looking for the catch. Finally, she asked quietly, "Why should I trust you?" It was a fair question, and James respected her for asking it. "You probably shouldn't, at least not yet. Trust is earned, not given. But I'll tell you this. I'm going to write down the name and number of my lawyer, my ranch foreman, and the local sheriff. You can call any of them and ask about my character. You can also keep your truck, your independence, and leave any time you want. I'm offering you a safe place to stay and a job if you want it. That's all." He pulled out his wallet, extracted a business card, and wrote the additional names and numbers on the back. He handed it to Sarah, being careful not to get too close, respecting her space. Sarah took the card with trembling fingers, and James realized for the first time how cold she must be. She'd been standing there in that inadequate coat, in the freezing wind, and hadn't complained once. She looked at the card, then at the crumbling cabin, then back at James. "I'd like to call these people first, if that's all right. And I'd like to see this cottage before I agree to anything." James smiled, relief flooding through him. "That's very sensible. My ranch is about 5 miles west of here. Why don't you follow me in your truck? You can make your calls from my office, meet my staff, and see the cottage. If you don't like what you see, I'll personally help you find somewhere else safe to stay before this storm hits." Sarah studied his face for what felt like an eternity, searching for any sign of deception. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she finally nodded. "All right, Mr. Thornton, I'll follow you. But I'm keeping my keys in my hand and my phone within reach." "Wouldn't have it any other way," James replied. 20 minutes later, Sarah's battered pickup truck followed, James's horse and trailer, up the long drive to Thornton Ranch. When the main house came into view, Sarah's eyes widened. It was a beautiful log mansion, all warm wood and huge windows, with smoke curling from multiple chimneys. The property was immaculate, with well-maintained barns, fenced pastures, and equipment that gleamed even in the gray winter light. James led her not to the main house, but to a smaller building about 100 yards away. The housekeeper's cottage was modest compared to the mansion, but to Sarah it looked like a palace. It had a covered porch, large windows, and what appeared to be a new roof. Inside it was warm and cozy, a living area with a fireplace, a full kitchen with modern appliances, a bathroom with a deep tub and shower, and a bedroom with a real bed covered in what looked like expensive linens. Sarah stood in the middle of the living room, tears streaming down her face. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why are you doing this?" James handed her the phone from the cottage's side table. Make your calls. Take your time. I'll be up at the main house when you're ready to talk. An hour later, Sarah knocked on the door of the main house. James opened it to find her composed but with red-rimmed eyes. I called everyone on that list, she said. They all vouched for you. Your foreman, Tom, said you're the best man he's ever worked for. Your lawyer said you give more to charity than anyone he knows. And Sheriff Dawson said that if I didn't take you up on your offer, I'd be the biggest fool in Montana. James chuckled. Tom's a good man, if a bit of a flatterer. Come in, please. Have you had anything to eat today? Sarah hesitated, then shook her head. Not yet. I was planning to heat up some soup. Later, James led her to his enormous kitchen and started pulling out ingredients. Let me make you something proper. We can talk while I cook. Over the next hour, as James prepared a hearty stew and fresh bread, Sarah's story spilled out. She told him about her husband, David, a good man who'd worked hard to provide for them. She spoke of his death, the legal battles with his employer, losing their home, and the desperate months that followed. She'd worked odd jobs, cleaning houses, waitressing, anything she could find, but it was never enough. She'd been living in her truck until she found the abandoned cabin. Through it all, James listened without judgment, stirring his pot and occasionally adding ingredients, letting her talk at her own pace. When the food was ready, they sat at his kitchen table, and Sarah ate like someone who hadn't had a real meal in months, which James suspected was close to the truth. After dinner, he walked her back to the cottage, showed her where everything was, and handed her a set of keys. The cottage is yours, he said simply. There's food in the refrigerator and pantry, fresh linens in the closet, and firewood stacked on the porch. Tomorrow, if you're interested, we can talk about what helping around the ranch might look like, but tonight you just rest. Sarah took the keys with shaking hands. Mr. Thornton, I don't know how I'll ever repay you. James smiled, and for the first time in 5 years it reached his eyes. You already have, Sarah. You've reminded me why my wife loved helping people, why she believed in giving others a chance. Sleep well. Welcome home. As he walked back through the snow to the main house, James felt something he hadn't experienced since Margaret died, a sense of purpose, of rightness, of being exactly where he was supposed to be. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew that finding Sarah Mitchell in that broken-down cabin wasn't just chance. Sometimes the universe puts people in our path, not just so we can help them, but so they can save us too.